It's been a year now since the death of Queen Elizabeth II after a record reign of 70 years, and it's been a year now of the reign of King Charles III. Beneath that change, an underlying change has taken place. Support for the monarchy has fallen. Not quite collapsed, but it is collapsing, and quite rapidly. The findings of a new survey will be worrying for the palace, to say the least. A YouGov poll shows that now a third of all Britons have a negative view of the monarchy, and that's up from less than a quarter from a similar poll conducted in September of last year. On the other hand, the number with a very positive view of the monarchy has fallen from 31% then to 20% now over this period. Support for abolition of the monarchy is now rising. These numbers seem to confirm a quite obvious trend, obvious to many people around, that very many people like King Charles very much less than they did the Queen. Charles, to be honest, was never particularly popular as Prince of Wales earlier, certainly not since the death of Diana in that car crash in Paris in 1997 and all that led up to that death. The coronation that came at a cost of about £250 million was intended to boost support for King Charles. It appears to have done quite the opposite, in fact. The Republic group, which has long campaigned against monarchy, says the event and all that plethora of ceremony through that event actually put a lot of people off the monarchy. It seemed to have irritated people, both by way of the ceremony and the cost of it, and especially the young. Signs had emerged from the palace itself, from within the palace soon after the coronation, indirectly, naturally, that not all of the royal family itself was very convinced that King Charles had gone about that coronation in quite the right way. Front page reports, quoting royal sources, appeared to suggest that Prince William would, when that time comes, do his coronation quite differently, and that he would do it far more simply. That message has not gone home to the king clearly. The palace has been in a PR overdrive now for over a year now to build up King Charles. It circulates all sorts of information, the history of the chairs he sits on, the detail of his new tartan outfit, but really who cares, other than some compulsive royalists, and their numbers are now clearly dwindling. This is now, of course, rudely early to speak about the coronation of Prince William, that eventual coronation, but the writing on the royal walls appears to be clear. Monarchy may well survive into the foreseeable future. In fact, it is likely to, but it will probably, almost certainly, have to shed its rather stuffy ways to do so. It will have to be a very different looking monarchy.
I think he's done quite well, actually. He's kept out of the controversy, which has been difficult for him, I think.
I think he's doing okay. You know, he'll get better as time goes. Yeah, this is his first time, so we need to give him a chance.
I mean, it's obviously big shoes to fill, but I think he's an amazing. I think he has the potential to really lead the monarchy in a good way, kind of bring the family together.
I don't know really. I think probably okay. I mean, he's not a sort of extravagant character, so I think you'd want him to be himself, really. You know, so he's got a lot that he supports a lot of environmental issues, which I think people appreciate.
The King's first year has certainly defied the expectations of his critics. I think it's been a very solid, stable start. You know, he was taking over from the longest reigning monarch in British history, which by any standards was going to be a big challenge to anybody. But I think what people tended to overlook was the fact that, yes, she was the longest reigning monarch, but he'd been the longest serving heir to the throne. He'd given it a great deal of thought. Yeah, inevitably, he's of a different generation to his mother. He's post-war. He went to university in the 60s and 70s. He's a more modern kind of monarch, but at the same time very respectful to the traditions of monarchy. There has not been a great You know, I think some predicted there'd be sort of suddenly kind of wind turbines all over Buckingham Palace, and everything would suddenly be going sort of, you know, there'll be huge upheavals, and there haven't been, because he understands that, you know, this is a very ancient institution, and of course he'll change it piecemeal. You know, there will be changes to the way things are done, which is what every monarch's done through. You know, those could have been that could have been a sort of destabilizing exercise fairly early on, but actually it didn't really move the dial at all. If you look at the polling, you know, I think there was a sense of, I think people are very familiar with the Sussex's narrative, and so what we saw effectively underlined and reinforced what we already knew. And meanwhile, the king just sort of got on with the job. There was no comment, there was no reaction, and I think people like that. They like that sort of dogged, sensible approach of Charles as an individual. Is lower than it was for the Queen as an individual, but it's still way higher than any other public figure. I mean, it's in the sort of, you know, the 60 to 70% bracket thing. He's doing a good job as king. There are fault lines, clearly. The polls repeatedly show apathy among the younger generation. That's sort of always been the case, but I think it's more the case now than it was. I think that's partly because we've got a new king who's 74 at the time of his coronation. I mean, he's the oldest new monarch we've ever had. And I think just generally young people in the 21st century are you know, they ask more questions. It's like, why do we have a monarchy? What's the point of it? What do they do? Why are they there? Why don't we vote for them? And that is clearly a long-term challenge, not just for King Charles, but, you know, for King William and in due course King George. They've got to maintain relevance. That's the big challenge for today.
Oh gosh, I don't know. I mean, it could be like Queen Victoria remembered Prince Albert with an enormous sort of memorial in Hyde Park, or it would be probably better if it was a foundation for young people. I mean, she was very fond of coming to Goodenough College, which provided accommodation for postgraduates in London, whether they were medical or undergraduates at university. So I think if there could be created a foundation in her name, which, you know, went forward with an endowment, I think that might be better than just a statue which people look at.
Well, I think, I mean, it's common for people to have statues of monarchs, isn't it? So, I mean, I think that would be expected, probably. That would be fine. Or maybe some fund to support people, you know, in one of her areas of interest, perhaps. I don't know.